they weren't meshed in with the Italian boys on the other side, and who were having a lot of fun and kind of enjoying and playing along. I think what it means is that we have to open our hearts to psychic messaging. Jeff was a synthesizer maker. He made the first he made the first freely available synthesizer. This is my first novel. I had to be absolutely certain that I was in familiar territory. And for example, I speak a little bit about horses, but that's because in the house that I have in the country, I lease some of my land to a woman who breeds horses. So I had experience of that. But equally, with respect to the art dealer, I know an art dealer, he lives just down the road from me, who actually deals in outsider art. And I said, do you mind if I base my narrator on you? And he said, no, sure, it'll help sell some paintings. So I would say probably 80-20. I think the 20 being the autobiographical stuff. Now I have to qualify that. When I wrote Tommy, when I started it, I'd based it on a book called Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. And if you can see any sign of Siddhartha in Tommy, I'd be surprised, because as it evolved, I started to write more and more and more about stuff that I was interested in. Now when I look at Tommy, I see that it's my childhood story. There's no question. It's a story about me as a little boy being in the post-war climate, being abandoned emotionally and actually by my two fabulous parents, who were glamorous and lovely and intoxicatingly brilliant, abandoned by them, given to a crazy grandmother because it was convenient for my mother, God bless her, and who abused me and hurt me and allowed me to witness sexual things and allowed me to be in the company of perverted men for 2 years. And I blacked it out completely. And it's only through a lot of detective work that I've been able to put this all together. So I don't know whether in this book, in 10 years' time, I'll be saying, oh my God, this is me, or that's me, or, one doesn't necessarily. I wrote an autobiography, so I'm hoping I've gotten it all out, but, you never know. Where Walter, the hero, what he's hearing, where does that come from? It comes from the neighbourhood. And the neighbourhood that I live in, I wanted it to be authentic, so the neighbourhood that I live in now is Richmond on Thames. It's a very wealthy neighbourhood. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that even though the people that live there are comfortable and well paid,
organic.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Vegans, except on Sunday. When I started to move around the neighbourhood and listen and talk to people, because I did a lot of research before I started to write, I discovered that there was this underlying denied, not just anxiety, a lot of it was, outright fear, not for themselves, but for their children and their grandchildren. And that's when I started the research, was in 2008. And of course today, now the book is out, we're 10 years, much more than 10 years on, this has become a dialogue. It's useful because it means that I don't have to quite explain so much about the idea, but I think every artist now must look at their audience and think, let's take a band like 1975, or an author like Paul Auster. Does Paul Auster keep writing about his weird childhood, and we have to try and find him in it? Or do 1975 write songs about, we have to kind of, raise the human race and have fun and fly? Or do they have to write about the stuff that we're afraid of? We're buying their books. What is the function of the artist in this context? So that's a dialogue and a conversation that I hope the book brings up. And I've created this rather wild, romantic, sexy, crazy girl, Selena, who not only sees angels, but believes that she has an angel inside her. We have to open our hearts and our minds to the fact that some people that appear to be crazy, that appear to be obsessive, that appear to be overly radical. I think Greta Thunberg today is a very good example, and I love the fact that she's been so welcomed and so embraced. I have a grandson who's 4.5 years old who's fully autistic, and it's incredible. He's beautiful. It's incredible to see how he functions and how I think he can see things that we can't see. The only person who I think takes drugs in the story is the narrator, and his story is that he's a recovering heroin addict. So he's an art dealer. That's how he makes his money, and he deals with what we call outsider artists, people that produce art brut in the French tradition, and he can see and understand how people who paint, who write, who make sculptures, who make music, who have visions, who see things differently to us, who, for example, can't speak very well but they can paint beautifully, who might be autistic or might be damaged mentally in some way, can still produce great art. He wants to be able to integrate with them. I wanted him to be able to integrate with them. Well, in fact, yeah, I mean, I could have just done a plot and put a story together and then done a rock opera, a series of songs. It's what I'm known for and what I would be good at. But no, I wanted to do something. Well, I'll just give you a bit of my background. Before I was in The Who, I was in a band called The Detours, which had some of the members of The Who in, and I was at art college. I was at art college in Ealing from 16 years old, 17, 18, 19. By the age of 19, I'd written a song which had been in the charts in the UK called I Can't Explain. And I was still going to lessons at Ealing Art College, studying at that time graphic design. But when I started in the two foundation years, and normally there's only one, there were 2 foundation years, I met all of these extraordinary, progressive, forward-seeing thinkers. The course itself kind of blew my mind. And so I'm in this little band. It felt to me like a band of yobbos. It was a band of yobbos. We were surrounded by yobbos. The Who's fans were mainly young men, and they were from the mod generation. They all wanted to be like boys from Paris and Milan, but they were all too ugly to do it. The redeeming feature was the fact that they picked up on music from Town to Motown. So they were dancers, they were experimenters in gender and gender display in particular. A lot of mod boys wore makeup, eye makeup in particular. And so my dream as an art student, which was to combine all of this fantastic teaching that I'd got, about, the possibility of being, creating an art installation which would include music and images and political discourse and all of that stuff, was whipped away from me. And I'm in this band and I'm thinking, well, and I had this conversation with my course leader, and I said, I'm really torn. I don't know whether to go on with this band or try to mix the two or stay at college. And he said, well, you do look very weary. He said, how much are you making in this band? And I said, £30 a week. And he said, Pete, that's more than I make. And you should go and do it, and then you can come back. If it doesn't work, you can come back.
And you never went back?
So my art installation, this project, is really me picking that up and kind of going, just maybe even, but I don't have to wait for Roger Daltrey to die before I do this. I can start this now.
Also, why do you think The Who is such a boys band? I mean, it's usually the men and boys are fans, not girls and women.
But I used to say to the other guys in the band, let's not have any women in the audience because they're fickle. I watched, they're fickle. You women are fickle about who you follow. And you must have been, I don't know whether you had crushes when you were young, of a film star or music performer. But I think if you're a young woman and you kind of, well, I did love him, but now I love him. Boys don't do that. Boys don't do that.
You're going to be crucified, Pete.
No, well, I'm sorry, but boys don't fucking do it. Once they have their football team, they stick with them for life, even when they're making crap, So, yesterday I did a talk that my publisher organised an academy, and the whole audience was men, and I got the feeling that not only were they men, but they were men who'd been following me since they were teenagers. And I hope I can gather them all round my deathbed. One of the questions from the audience was, I'm a fan and I've been to 150 concerts. If you had to choose one Who concert, which one would you go to? And I very honestly said I wouldn't have gone to see the Who ever.
Your promoter must love you.
Well, they don't. They're not my kind of band. No, I'm not being smart. They're just not. Corny, macho bollocks. Not arty enough for me. Writing songs for the Who audience is a bit like being a journalist. Writing a regular magazine, let's say for a company that makes refrigerators. They're only interested in matters that are to do with refrigerators. Who fans only really want to hear music that relates to the stuff that they've heard before, that relates to the neighbourhood. And I think the interesting thing about Who fans is they've kind of defined us. They defined us in our first couple of years, so it was very difficult for us to evolve. And I'm an artist and I'm a writer, and I love writing more than I like, particularly music writing. I like music writing more than I like performing. In fact, I don't really like performing at all. And I don't enjoy it very much. I don't. I'll often come off stage and people will say, "Oh, you had a good time tonight." And I go, "No." What do you mean? Well, you smiled. And I had to check that, and I thought, well, what's actually going on here? Because I really don't enjoy it, but I'm really good at it, and I find it incredibly easy. So I'm a bit like somebody that's got a knack for making a really nice particular kind of chair. I can just do it, and I don't have to think about it. And I hope I'm not acting. I hope I'm not being insincere. I'm not on the stage pretending to like it. But I think occasionally that might be happening.
Was it always like this?
Yeah.
Even when you were much younger?
Yeah. I didn't want to be in this particular band. I would much have preferred to be in a much smarter, artier band. I had to play with these guys, so I'm prejudiced. I don't ascribe to the notion that what I did was groundbreaking, or that what Jen Entwistle did on the bass was groundbreaking, or that Keith Moon was a great drummer, or that he was even fucking funny. He was a pain in the neck. And Roger Daltrey, I joined Roger Daltrey's band because I was a boy who couldn't fight, who was very, very nervous, needed help to grow up. I was a very late developer. I didn't have sex till I was 18. I needed to be in a gang, so I joined this band that Roger Daltrey had founded, not me, and he was the school bully. So I felt safe. It's the last really, really fantastically mind-fucking piece of music that I've ever heard in my entire life. Came from Finland, but it wasn't rock. It came from Jaakko Kuusisto, who wrote his first violin concerto, and it's beyond belief. You have to check it out. And who am I listening to today? I really love Billie Eilish, but she's well known and huge. And again, she's Scandinavian. I think she's particularly interesting because she refuses to be pigeonholed and refuses to be sexualized. Taylor Swift is somebody that I occasionally listen to. She did a TV show recently singing a song by my best friend Billy Nichols called I Can't Stop Loving You, and it's and she just sat in a chair and just sang this song that I've lived with for the last 40 years. You know, I was involved in making the demo recording. I really like Kendrick Lamar, who's a hip-hop artist. I still listen to Missy Elliott a lot. But I think I listen to a whole wide range of stuff. I went to see the Stones a few times in the early days, and I like them. But today, I would want to see the Stones the way they were. So I'd probably want to see a band that was a bit like the Stones. You know, for a while, Primal Scream were like the Stone clones. So I loved them for a long time, and I still like them. But I love going and seeing the Stones when I can because of Mick's incredible energy and Keith Richards' extraordinary kind of carelessness. And David Bowie was my fucking invention. So I think, you know, he was he sort of modelled his whole career on 4 or 5 conversations that I had with him when he was a child. He came to see Tommy I asked him to look after my son, my little brother Simon, and they both came up to me after the concert. And they were really excited. This first performance of Tommy at the Royal Albert Hall. I'm going to do this, said David Bowie. And, I'm going to do this, said my brother Simon. They were both saying the same thing. So I think in a sense, yeah, I love David Bowie and I have worked with him and I really respected him. But no, I wouldn't have gone to see him. In his Aladdin Sane period, I'd go and see a man dressed up as a what? What was it? I got fairly Catholic taste in music. Well, what's interesting about the rebellions that I grew up with is that they were, in most ways, they were almost silent. You know, the function of the song My Generation was to draw a line, not to start a war. Our revolution was just drawing a line, just saying, we're not like you, and we never will be, and we will never, I'd rather die than be like you, because you are old. That word old doesn't mean old in age. It wasn't ageist. It's been taken to be ageist when people say to me, you said you were going to die before you get old, and now you're old. What do you think of that then, eh? So I think that song was about, drawing a line between generations, really. As young men, in the band, certainly. And also I mentioned our managers, Kit Lambert and Chris Stamp, both really quite smart guys. They were about 4 years older than us. Kit Lambert took me on and mentored me as a songwriter, and really, really smart and clever guy. But I knew that he wasn't like us, the guys in the band. It wasn't just because he was posh, and he was posh, but he was somebody that was born in the war. And if you were born in the war, you were different to those who were born immediately after the war, because you were a few years older. You'd had a childhood experiences, infant experiences of being involved in bombing, in families that have been broken up because of the war, embracing refugees, the Polish refugees in particular that came to the hometown where I grew up, in Acton and Ealing. So that line that we drew was just to say, we can't do what you did. We can't be like you. We can't follow your rules. We can't respect the order of things because we're not part of the order of things. One day I go across to the Express Dairy, which is a place where you could get everything that you need, food, really, like a food shop. And I just went to get some milk for my tea. And I said, could I have a pint of milk, please? And I'm just about to get the milk. And this woman walks in. She's got this huge hair like this, huge hair, great big white mink coat, and pushes me out of the way. I mean, literally, get out of my way. I'll have my usual, please, she says. And the guy behind the counter completely ignores the fact, I want to say, hey, madam, I was before you. you know, and I'm English, you're supposed to queue. And I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe that I'd been cast aside like this. And this woman I wanted to open up a dialogue with her and say, listen, what the fuck? You know, just because you've got money, just because you've got the big hair, you know, and the fur coat, you can't do that. You know, I need my milk for my tea. And only to buy, so, you know, the same thing I just said is, I actually live here. I live in Eaton Square. And so I think I went home and I started to work on this song, My Generation, and it's about drawing a line. And I think that song was so valuable and important to me because I realised what it is that my generation was doing, not what we needed to do. I wasn't leading, I was following. That's what we were doing. We were drawing a line and we were saying, from now on, we're going to make our own rules. And when we made those rules, a lot of them were not very useful. The hippie movement, which followed quite soon in 66, 67, it fizzed out quite quickly. It was colourful, it was fun, but it was pointless. So no, there were no revolutions, and now there are. You know, we see revolutions in Hong Kong, there's a revolution in Chile that I mentioned. You know, Greta Thunberg is creating a revolution. I think it's different now. I think it's not just about the fact, I think it is about, to some extent about the fact that the revolution is the fact that people can speak to each other through social media. And we lack context because of that. We lack neighbourhood because of that. You know, the people in Chile know what's going on in Chile, but all we can see is what's going on from the outside. We need friends there. We need people that we know there. We need to be able to know what's going on. It's complicated. I haven't really worked it out yet. I voted to remain in the European Union as anybody would if they knew what was going to happen if they voted Brexit. I think a lot of people in this country voted to leave the European Union because they thought that they would get Little England back. Now, there's nothing wrong with Little England. We all love it. You know, we love Agatha Christie, we like pints of beer, we like, those Yorkshire pudding things with our roast beef. We like our roast beef to be cooked so much that it's like leather and you can't eat it. You know, all those things we love about our country, and we feel threatened. And I think where the woman I spoke of earlier, for example, who breeds horses, and her husband, they're a little bit older than me, but not much. They both furiously voted Brexit. And when I said to the woman, I said, but why? What? And she said, I didn't, not that she fought in the war. We didn't fight in the war in order to be told what to do by Angela Merkel. In the inference being that she was German, and you think, wow, but then, we're old people, we're an old country, and we think in old ways. And I think nobody has really understood the benefit of being in the European Union, and particularly my youngest child is Joseph. He was 28, and his girlfriend Lauren. They're both artists. When they got the news, they cried. They literally cried. They broke down and cried, and I think it's almost inevitable that what will happen next in this country is that the young people will come out and vote because they didn't vote. And that's why we are leaving the European Union. And I think because I don't think we should have another referendum, so what will I vote? I would normally be a socialist voter. But if I vote socialist and Jeremy Corbyn comes after me, I'm back where I was in 1973, where I had no fucking money at all. None. Absolutely none. And I'm a big rock star, and I have to drive around in a cheap car, and I live in a small house, and have people say to me, you lucky cunt. It costs me a lot of money to do my job. So I don't want to be tokenized politically. I am a socialist. I do believe I'm happy to pay high taxes, but I do want to be left a little to be able to live well. And I've been spoiled, I suppose, too. I've got a soft underbelly now.
And
which you say that the two concerts in Italy, in Milan and Bologna, made you like keep going on making new music. You were like some kind of like feeling down. And
Bologna in particular, yeah. The audience was mainly boys, and on the right hand side, boys, young men, and on the right hand side, about a third of the audience was a particular group of boys, and they seemed slightly uncomfortable. They weren't meshed in with the Italian boys on the other side, and who were having a lot of fun and kind of enjoying and playing along. And afterwards, I took the promoter aside and I said, who was this gang of kids that kept separate? And they were Syrian refugees. And I suppose they were sort of giving it a try. But what's interesting is that Bologna welcomed those boys. And I found that profoundly moving. And I also know now that those boys, a lot of them, because they came en masse without women, they were just boys who managed to cross the borders to go to Bologna, caused Bologna quite a lot of difficulty. And still, they were at our concert. So it felt to me somehow that something unbelievably magical had happened, which is another reason, in a sense, why, you know, in the European Union, we look to the Middle East and the trouble in the Middle East as something that together we might be able to accommodate and deal with.